What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Facade. I am your host, Gavin J. Gallagher, and on this podcast, I explore the mental and emotional game, often playing out subconsciously, both in your mind and the mind of everyone else in the real estate or property investment market. The key to success in this game is to master your mindset and behavior, to take control of your thoughts, your emotions, and most importantly, your ego. Welcome to the show. Guys, real quick before we begin, just want to ask you a quick favor. If you can, please stop what you're doing and leave a review for the podcast. Whatever platform you're listening in on, if you can give us a 5-star or whatever the highest rating is, it would be fantastic. And even better, if you found it useful in any way, please write that down on a very brief review if that's possible. It makes such a difference to how the podcast is received out there and pushed out on various platforms. That's all, nothing else to ask. Now let's get on with the show. Hey guys, welcome back. This week I'm speaking with another guest by the name Matt Grady. Now this is not going to be one of the typical conversations because Matt is actually a former golf pro who went on tour with the PGA and all that. And why am I speaking to him? Well, it's very much around the mindset and that aspect of it. Matt has an interesting book that came out recently, and we're going to get into some of the tactics he has around mindset. And the thrust of this conversation is turning pro, and how a lot of people who are in the who would have, say, an amateur mindset, they will dabble in property. And so I'm going to bring it back to the property linkage. What dabbling in property is one thing. When you're a professional, you go all in. And that's something that Matt talks about on our conversation today. So without further ado, my conversation with Mr. Matt Grady. Matt Grady, welcome to the podcast.
Cheers, Gavin. Brilliant to be here.
Matt, it's not often that I get to speak with a golf pro or a former golf pro. And so this is going to be a very interesting conversation. It's going to be different from the usual. And for all of the listeners that were listening in that are expecting some real estate investment advice this week, Matt's not here to give you real estate investment advice. I think the only touch point he has with property is a mortgage. But what Matt has is a lot of really, really excellent advice on. He's actually written a book called Making the Cut. And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but the subtitle of your book is Turning Pro in Sport, Business and Life.
That's right, yeah. I was going to call it Turning Pro, but then I realised Stephen Pressfield wrote a book called Turning Pro and the War of Arts. I thought I better not kind of touch on that. But it was in my mind thinking, this is what I want to talk about. And this is the theory and the mindset of everything I do is in a professional.
This is it. I mean, and it's like that saying that you were saying that amateurs dabble, but professionals are all in. And there's a very big parallel between that concept and like real estate. When people are talking about becoming a property investor, a lot of the time it's like they buy a house they buy a house and they rent it, and then they might buy a second house, and so they have 2 rental properties. Like that's not a professional property investor. A professional property investor has got a portfolio, and he might, you can grow that portfolio to any size. And even if you don't have the capital yourself, you can raise money from investors and stuff like that. So I thought this was a really, really useful analogy. And whether you're turning pro as a golfer or whether you're turning pro as a tennis player or, rugby player, and we obviously Ireland had its big rugby win over the weekend, but turning pro as a concept is what we're here to talk about today. Before we get into that, I would like to turn back the clock on young Matt Grady, growing up as a kid, and you decided to get into golfing. That didn't come from nowhere. Tell us about your introduction to golf and how it kind of dawned on you that you should think about becoming professional.
Yeah, thanks, Gavin. So I'm 40 now. So we've got to rewind the clock 33, almost 34 years when I first picked up a golf club. And I had an influence and family influence. My uncle was a golf pro. He picked me up from school one day. He came over to visit from Germany, and he was got his Porsche Carrera with the black checkered seats from the late 80s, early 90s. And I thought, wow, I didn't really realize what that meant, but it meant that he was doing well in his career, I think.
Yes.
And I said to my mum, what does Uncle Dave do? I remember it like it was yesterday. I said he's a golfer, he's a golf pro. Right, okay, can I play golf? And Dave cut me down some golf clubs, and we started. So I'm from Leeds in Yorkshire, and we used to go and visit some family in Scarborough, and we got a static caravan. That's what we did then. And outside the back of the static caravan, there was probably about 12 acres of land, all grass. With these golf clubs, tore up that grass every weekend that we went there for hours and hours and hours upon end. And that's where, and with the support of my dad and my granddad, who were also interested in golf, not to the level of Uncle Dave, but they'd been around Dave and they had an interest in golf. They supported that journey.
And so, like, let's say you're in your mid-teens and you're starting to kind of like having to make, like, I here in Ireland we call it the junior cert and the leaving cert, but in the UK it's the A levels and the O levels, or vice versa.
Yeah, GCSEs and then A levels. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when you're doing, so you have to knuckle down and start studying. I imagine when you're looking at becoming a golf pro, that is not necessarily the first thing that's on your mind. Well, tell us a little bit about navigating schoolwork trying to become a golf pro.
Well, I love sport as well, and a good role model that I mentioned in the book as well, Simon Hall, our PE teacher, and I met up with him about a year ago. It's the first time I've seen him in 22 years, and he hadn't changed much. And he remembered, and he reminded me of something that I didn't really remember. He said, "I remember you coming to me one day and saying, 'Sir, I don't know how to revise for these exams.'" And he said, "I always knew that, I was always in the first 15 rugby team, playing for a football team outside of school golf." He said, "I always knew you would do something in sport." But what was probably going on internally in my mind was I was starting to feel the pressures of education and performing academically. And my dad had a business. He was a plumbing and heating engineer. He had his own business. He was sort of 6 days a week, you could probably say, and around for the Sunday to take me to football, but plenty supportive. But they weren't really on my case with my education like I am with my daughter. So I was left to my own devices, but a young lad left to his own devices, with a football, a rugby ball, or a golf club, I'm gone, and I'm not really investing in school. And something that's been really important as I speak to my daughter is about being inspired. And I can tell when she's not in a good class is when she's not inspired by the learning. And I definitely remember not being inspired by school. And I started to think, what am I going to do in life? And golf was getting better. And I was starting to come through the ranks of the Yorkshire team as well, the sort of elite amateur golf. And I managed to land a job at a golf club in Leeds when I was about 15, working in the pro shop. And I was around some great influences. For the first time in a long time, I was around people who were doing something in the sport that I was passionate about. Right. And then it snowballed from there, really.
It's just going back to what you were saying there, I can completely resonate with the idea of being inspired by your teachers or whatever. Like today I look back at when I was in school, I lacked the academic thing completely. I was an appalling student. I had no concentration. Like I couldn't hold a concentration on the class, or whatever. But what's really interesting, so I would have flunked out of history, flunked out of geography, flunked out of science as topics. But today, like I have an insatiable curiosity. Like I spend hours like reading a history, geography about the Ice Age and about all this kind of stuff. And yet I took zero interest in that in school. And the universe and like cosmos and black holes and all this, like I'm fascinated by all that. And yet when they were trying to teach you in school, it's been driven down your throat, like you have to learn this whether you like it or not, rather than inspiring people and getting them sort of to see why this is interesting, as opposed to you must learn this, you have to learn this, pay attention, stop being distracted at the back of the classroom.
It's so interesting you say this, Gavin, because I write in the book about this. I said, the irony is people come to me now with their problems about maths, about business, about strategy. And I was not the student. And I've written it in the book as well. I said, the irony is, I'm the guy they come to now, like you.
It's amazing. Yeah. it's I think there's something about, I don't know, would you consider yourself to have had ADHD or anything that as a young person?
No, I've never thought about that. No, I mean, people think I've got OCD now, but it's just an insatiable eye for detail. I think.
I think you can safely call that OCD because I have to.
Yeah.
Like I take pride in my OCD and I take pride in my ADHD now, because it's funny. Like once you realize, like retrospectively, I haven't been diagnosed or anything like that, but I'm pretty sure I had it because I found it so hard to concentrate. Like I still have my report cards from when I was in school, and I can see them, like spelling test 1 out of 50. Okay. I mean, it's hard to get 1 out of 50. Like,
sorry to laugh, but you're laughing.
and it's like, so I think to myself, like, now it's like the fact that I'm doing all these things that I'm doing now, it just shows that if you've got this kind of ADHD, it's actually directing you, channeling your energy, and you can actually have hyper focus in some areas because you have zero focus in kind of general stuff, And so anyway,
I was really dabbling. I was dabbling all the way. I know we talk about the quote there, but yeah, I felt like I was never all in anywhere.
You're right. Yeah,
I just meandering around, just getting through, but it wasn't pleasurable. And the outlet where I was all in was sport.
Yeah, and I'd say a lot of people can relate to that. And tell me this, I mean, you've decided, let's just move forward. You've decided that, you're working in a shop. How long does it take from, we'll say, dabbling and working shop to becoming a pro? Like what kind of hours and dedication did you have to put into that?
Well, the sad news for me is when I found out when I was 15 and I was around the pros, I said, what do I need to do to qualify to join the PGA, which is the 3-year academic membership to become a member of the PGA. So, and I think looking back, it's so that you can represent the governing body or the association, the association in the most positive light. One of them is you need 4 GCSEs, minimum C. This is going back 22 years. I thought, shit, I better turn it up. I'm sort of embarrassed to say this, but I scraped 5, but I got a D in maths. So I needed to resit my maths GCSE whilst I was doing my A-levels.
Right.
Which was a nightmare. But I had a maths teacher who inspired me during my A-levels. And I remember telling Simon Hall, my PE teacher, 20 years later, last year, I said, if I would have had her as my teacher, I would have aced maths in school because she inspired me to learn.
I tell you, there's a couple of parallels I can immediately So I was not the student at all, okay, and I was flunking through everything because I had zero interest. And then I went on a family holiday to New York City, and when I was on that family holiday, I was just looking up at these skyscrapers, and I was just blown away, like by 50, 80, 100-story buildings. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, like this is unbelievable. And when I came home, I started drawing these towers and just becoming obsessed with big, high, tall buildings and stuff. And as I started doing that, family members were seeing these drawings I was producing, really accurate sort of representations. And they were like, Gavin, you know what you're going to be? You're going to be an architect. And I was like, oh, what's an architect? And suddenly a light goes off. Oh, how do I become an architect? Well, you need all these points to get into the college. Suddenly laser focus to get the points needed to get into architecture. And all of the years of paying no attention, that did not help. But from that day that I suddenly realized I needed to pay attention, I suddenly could pay attention. And so it's amazing how, and also the right teachers, if you find the right teacher who can get through to you and kind of I have daughters that are, in doing their leaving cert. One of my daughters is doing leaving at the moment. And it's the final exam you do before you go to university. And she was not very academic in, junior school and stuff like that, because she was in a school she didn't really like. And now suddenly I'm sending her to this institute that they have this kind of really intense kind of teaching and stuff like that. And she's become a much, much better student. because of the way that they teach. And so it's interesting, all of this kind of stuff. Anyway.
Focusing the mind. Yeah. So we're in that stage of 15, 16 years old, starting to be in the right environment, almost like finding my tribe at a young age. And there's a couple of other events that happened, and I could have gone in a very different direction because a good friend of mine, I mentioned, but Shane, worked in the golf club as well behind the bar. And his uncle is a famous DJ, and Shane got me into DJing and being an all-in. Perhaps I am ADHD. Bought the decks, bought the records, went on to have a 5-year sort of hobby career working in bars. One bar in particular for about 5 years, which is where I met my other half 20 years ago. And that was a hobby that I was getting very well paid for whilst working 6 days at the golf club, whilst I was doing my... So that was really interesting. But that, for me, was a passion that I did well, that I didn't ever take serious as a career, because I knew the implications of sort of family and relationships around staying up until 1 a.m, DJing. But I was around the right crowd who were influencing me in a positive way to pursue my goal of becoming a professional golfer. And so back to your question there. Yeah, sorry.
In terms of like the hours that you would put in, is this like a 9 to 5 job when you become a pro golfer, like that you're now just spending 9 to 5 in the afternoon in the golf course or on the golf course?
So I was still a student at the time doing my A-levels. So I was starting to pick up more hours around the lessons that I was doing. I was just doing 3 subjects in A-levels plus my GCSE retake. So I was starting to find more hours. But one thing that is very important, it was at the time, and it's not as much anymore, actually, they've opened the door a lot, was playing ability. So you had to play to an extremely high standard. You had to be a scratch golfer or better to qualify, which means 0 or better. And you had to evidence that in tournaments. So I had to keep my playing game up. So probably at this point, 20 hours at the golf club, working in the shop, learning how to build golf clubs as well, sort of doing the club repairs and being around the whole business. I was probably 10 hours at school, college, and then the rest of any other hours in the week were playing golf and working on fitness. Yeah, just squeezing absolutely everything out of my time. And then you start the PGA. Sorry.
Do you think, I mean, obviously golfing, it's how much of it is a natural talent and how much of it is, driven by the amount of practice that you do and things like that?
I think physically it's I don't know about this sort of innate stuff, but I think you have to be able to find a way, no matter how it looks, to be able to make good contact and dictate where the ball goes. And sort of it's more like a feel thing that you can acquire. And it's a really good question, because I'd like to just brush it off and say it's God-given talent sort of thing, but I think you can develop the skills, and with the right technology, the right coaching, can become it's a learned skill. But obviously if you start young, it's a lot easier. If you start young.
Yeah, I didn't start as a young guy. Like, I don't particularly enjoy golf, but I did live in the south of Spain, and I was literally, my garden, the house I own in Spain has a garden that overlooks San Roque Golf Club.
Oh, what a place.
It's literally, that was when I'm having my breakfast, I'm looking out on San Roque's Golf Club. And so I was in this whole golfing circle for 5 or 6 years, and most of my friends played golf. I rarely played it, but it did kind of rub off on me. So I had a set of clubs and all that kind of stuff. But I just sort of thought, you know what? I did not take this up at a young enough age. I cannot learn this, and I just don't have the interest in it. And so therefore, I just kind of dropped it. I prefer, the active sports like triathlon, running, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people can become good, but I've never seen anybody at the top level who wasn't playing when they were a kid.
Yeah, I would have thought
because of the skill involved. I've seen adults become amazing runners, and they were hopeless athletes as teenagers, and rock climbers and so on. But I think some of these games, I think you really have to.
There's the saying that you need to put in your 10,000 hours.
The Gladwell stuff. Yeah.
And I mean, I would have thought that, like, if you start as a young person playing golf, then by the time you're 20, you've done 10,000 hours.
And I calculated it as well. I think by about 50, being the kind of, maybe I am a bit on the spectrum. I think by the time I was 15, I'd done about 10,000 to 10 to 12,000 hours.
So there you go. I mean, that's the evidence that I would say that, yeah, it does make a big difference, because otherwise, how do you go pro as a 30-year-old? Like, oh, if I start playing every day now, sure, I have a job. How am I going to, like, you know, kind of find the time to do 10,000?
Very difficult. Very difficult. Yeah.
So tell us, I mean, give us a little insight into, when you're a pro, is that the pro on tour, or is that the pro working at the golf course? How do you differentiate the two?
Yeah, so two very different sides. You probably, funny enough, an exception would be Ian Poulter, who turned pro through the PGA route that I did as well, but wasn't necessarily a brilliant player. He was a low handicap, but it wasn't as low as me or others actually. But went on to be a prolific Ryder Cup player. Never lost a match in singles, I don't believe. So, but there are very much two different types, and through the 3 years of the qualification, you learn about business and tax, you learn about club repairs, rules and tournaments, biomechanics. You learn the whole business, as well as playing ability and coaching. But you soon know, I think you probably know through playing regional events at a smaller scale, whether you're going to compete and whether you've got the mindset and the ability to manage your state whilst playing for money. Because as soon as you turn pro, you're in the money game. You're putting down money, you're earning money. Yeah, absolutely. So what I did is, given that I didn't go to uni or academically, I decided I'm going to qualify with the PGA, which took 3 years, and then I'm going to ramp up my playing at the same time. So turning pro at 18, qualifying in the PGA at 21, so a full member, got that, can never lose that. I then decided I need to seek sponsorship to play, and I put together so I could have stayed in the club route, pro shop, club pro, club fitting, coaching, but I aspired to be a player since I started, so I wanted to pursue that dream, and put together a spreadsheet, gave it to the club secretary, Ken McRae, and he distributed to the members in the early 2000s. And I didn't realize how affluent the golf club was, but they very kindly put together about 40 grand in a few days.
Wow.
And that was me gone. I was straight to tour school.
It's interesting. And tell me this, I mean, just like, I'm very, very inexperienced in this kind of stuff, so I don't really understand. But I mean, to be a golf pro working at a club or something like that, what you've described with the coaching and all that, I presume that you're describing a pro as just like having a job. It's yes, kind of a modest enough living. Whereas when we're talking about Tiger Woods and guys like these that are earning hundreds of millions, it's because they've made the name for themselves, and they've got Nike knocking on their door and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. Like the amount of people that make it to the big time like that versus the numbers of people that are just the club pro, and like, you're both pros, but there's a very difference in income and that you're taking home. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it's like go-karting and F1 sort of thing. It's there's a huge golf and a huge learning curve on the way as well, and many layers to go through. I mean, you could skip the whole queue and qualify for main tour school, or qualify through that route straight in, or you could grind it out on the regional, satellite, and sort of European or Asian or North American Corn Ferry tours and these kind of smaller circuits to get you away. Yeah, so there's a big journey to get there.
It sounds like it. And is there a point where you say, do you know what, I need to, I don't know, what was the kind of motivation to leave the pro world behind and get into business and stuff? Is it based on income, or is it based on you lose kind of interest in what you're doing? Why would you drop a career as a pro golfer to get into business?
Yeah, I think the crux of it really was I was self-employed as a golf pro. You're kind of running your own business. You are your own income source as well. And I was starting to think about family, and we were starting to think about buying our first property, and really realized that I couldn't produce anything stable to show for. So I decided I'm going to see what life outside of golf looks like. And a few people that I knew said, hey, you should try this. You're really good with people, and you've got a natural aptitude for this. And self-motivation, drive, blah, blah. You should look at sales. So I looked at, I took a role in sales, sort of direct sales role with a furniture company called Sharp's Bedrooms. And I was in direct sales, I was making calls and booking appointments for designers, and very quickly sort of ruffled a few feathers there and got to the top of the team as well. And, those who were doing well were really happy that I was doing well in such a short space of time. But those that weren't doing very well felt a little bit embarrassed and didn't like me a lot.
They don't like to be outshined.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? And the book, is it The Power of Robert Greene, Never Outshine the Master? And I was outshining a few people who thought they were the masters. But anyway, so culturally, I wasn't loving that. But what happened is the group and business went into administration, although Sharp survived. Dolphin and Mobin went home the same day, gone, never to be seen again.
Wow.
And I thought, I've just started to get some stability so I can buy this property, and this is going on. I don't need this. And for the first time ever in all my life, created a CV in my sort of late 20s, early 30s, put it online as you do. I think it was Monster or something at the time. And Michael Page picked it up. I went for an interview and got the job. And
so tell us, for us Irish audience, Michael Page, what does that mean?
So Michael Page is a large recruitment business, about 5,000 staff, one of the global sort of big players, more corporate recruiter in the industry, okay. All disciplines, and they've got regional offices all over the place.
So this is a headhunting recruitment business.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So you fitted into that role better.
I fit into that role. Yeah, 2011. Yeah, July 2011, dropped into Michael Page. But actually, left there after 6 months. So here's the crazy thing. I had one job for 12 years, golf pro. And in the last 12 years, I've had 12 jobs.
My God.
But for 7 years out of the 12, I've been in 2 places.
Right.
So I made some very quick moves when I knew I was in the wrong place. And Michael Page for me was a discretionary bonus. Let's work on the team benefit. If the team wins, you win. And I was very much still an individual contributor and player, and couldn't associate somebody's poor performance with my good performance.
And why should you suffer? Yeah, why should you suffer? Yeah.
And I suffered for 6 months. I'd got off the mark and done what I had been asked to do and more, and wasn't rewarded for it. And I said goodbye to that.
Yeah. I don't think that kind of what is it, meritocracy?
Very much.
So tell us, I mean, you mentioned when we were chatting just before the call started, you were saying that you've actually met James Caan, and James Caan is the famous recruiter that was a dragon in the Dragon's Den for quite a few years. Tell us about that experience, because a lot of people would recognize him as a very successful man. He made hundreds of millions selling his business, didn't he?
He made nearly 100 million selling Alexander Mann Solutions, which is one of the original recruitment businesses. He is a bit of a pioneer in the recruitment industry, and James runs a business that has been responsible for acquiring a number of other recruitment businesses. Now, the model's not for everything, and it didn't work for us at the time as well. And but I'd read his book, The Real Deal.
I think I have that. It's a good book, isn't it? Yeah,
I like it. And Theo Paphitis has got a book as well, a very nice book. I like the Dragons. I like their stories. And we'd been called upon as a potential acquisition as well, to looking at our business to be acquired. And I learned from James that he had a model, and we were very interested in learning how he'd grown and sold a business for nearly 100 million.
Wow. Yeah.
I don't know what the transaction lingo is. He sold it and he walked away with nearly 100 million. So we were very keen. How
do you do that, Matt? Tell us. How do you how do you sell a business for 100 million?
Well, something that hugely successful brand he'd built there, but something that I'd implemented in golf years ago when I realised that on the Ferris wheel or whatever it is, just almost the modern day rat race, trying to do everything for nearly 80, 90 hours a week. There's a point that comes where you have to transition and think, okay, what am I doing? Is this the right thing to be doing? How do I prioritize my efforts to get the maximum output from my practice? And as a result, my events and performance. And what James has done, and Rob Moore documented this in an interview, was that he had a system for every job in the business.
Right.
And he built solid systems, processes, and an operational manual for scaling and replicating roles and scaling businesses in all industries, I believe. And that is a model that I think works. I think because I've seen it work as well in smaller and larger businesses as well.
The biggest problem I think people have is that you hire somebody, you train them up, and then they leave, and you have to start back at square one. And so the idea of that model, by the sounds of it, is that as you're training somebody, you're also building a document on how that person is being trained, so that when they leave, you can actually take that document and hand it to the next person and say, there you go, that's exactly what the job is.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a working formula and something that's constantly evolving, and it can be quite detailed and maybe laborious to do. So I think the way I've implemented over time is, like many things, just start really small and get the foundations, and then add and jazz it up as you may like to make it look appealing, but really providing the fundamentals to do the bare minimum to get the task done. And I think on many occasions I've had to go through every process. And let's just say something like setting up a social media account. What are the step by step? Because I'd started training people internally in businesses on how to maximize their efforts through LinkedIn. And I realized that trying to tell them and inspire them didn't really do it for them, because they just wanted to know how. So I started copy and pasting all the click this, send this, measure that, did that work, try that. So create
an action plan. An action plan, yeah. People want tactical action steps, don't they?
Yeah, I think so. If you could give anybody a formula to do, I mean, the majority of people probably won't follow it like a diet. Here's a formula, follow it, because there's so much information and people are just going everywhere to get it. And JP says, if information was lacking, no,
yeah.
I'm just trying to think, the library would be the richest place in the world. Okay,
yeah.
I'm slaying the quote, but people, I think, tend to ruminate on information too long, where they should be taking action on items and finding out for themselves what the results are.
And it's an iterative process. Like I've heard a couple of people, you have to be prepared to take action. Even if you fail, you at least know that route that you tried doesn't work, and so now you're on to the next one. Whereas a lot of people will sit back and ruminate over what's the perfect action that I should take, and they'll have 12 options and they won't be able to choose one, so nothing gets done, basically. Whereas
absolutely,
the person who takes action will have tried 9 of them and will be getting pretty close to hitting the right one by the time the other person is. Interesting.
And I think probably, and I think back to sport and golf, is there are fundamentals that need to be done in order to get the desired result, to hit the ball in the direction you want to hit it. It's grip, stance, ball alignment, club face. There's a couple of things, and do that right, and you're not far off. And I just bring that into business. And when I want to do a task, I break it down to component level, and then put that into action and remove unnecessary items to make it a smaller list as we go.
So take me through that. I mean, you were telling me earlier about your sport and acronym. Where do you use that, and how can people listening today use that?
Yeah, I think if you're about to take on a new endeavor or do something new, I think there's barring technology and sort of technical items that you might need, I thought of a process that somebody could follow that could be replicated and improved upon every time. So I found the acronym SPORT. This is before ChatGPT as well, so it took me bloody ages, as you can imagine. So SPORT, so the S stands for setting up for success, and that's laying the foundations of what you're about to do. What do I need to do? What are the equipment I need? What is the knowledge I need? What is the script I need? What is the link that I need to send somebody to buy something? What do I need to know about this product in order to sell it? The bare minimum and basics. of what it is I need to move forward.
Okay.
And then the P is process, and developing a process that works for you to get optimum results. But you don't really know about the optimum results until we get to the T. The O is that we're going to find obstacles along the way.
Of course, yeah, lots of those.
And how do we come over those obstacles, and how do you build the mindset to come over those, and to be aware that they're inevitable?
Yeah, it's not just
the
you
journey.
facing.
Yeah, absolutely. And whilst you're dealing with obstacles, you need the R, which is resilience. And I think that's the secret sauce, really, and the secret weapon that most people lack, because they try and bypass the process and get to the result by clicking one click buy, arrive tomorrow. You know, my daughter nearly has a breakdown if something doesn't arrive on time. You know, she's not built the resilience of waiting for something in the post. As an example,
things not working or whatever.
Yeah. Why is this not turning on? Well, do you know what? Sometimes it doesn't turn on, and you just gotta get over that and deal with it. So the building resilience, and then the final letter T is triumph. Hopefully, you're having triumph here when you're putting this in, but also testing as well. So testing the assumption: is that the best setup? Is that the best process? How did I deal with these obstacles? What obstacles occurred in sales? We talk about objection handling, and when you list all the objections, you figure out there's not that many. Yeah, there's not that many. Can we remove any? How can we find a way around that through better process, so we don't come across as many obstacles, but still building resilience along the way by tackling them and taking action and testing again and testing and tweaking and testing and tweaking. That's sport. You know, how many times has David Beckham taken a free kick? I'm showing my age. You know, how many times has Tiger hit a wedge from 100 yards? How many times did I hit a wedge from 100 yards? Maybe not as many as Tiger because he's still going, but, you know, as many in my youth as anyone else that was achieving a high level.
Yeah.
So that's my acronym that I've transitioned into the business world.
And so tell us what you're doing today, Matt. And obviously that's a leading question because you work with
you got the
my performance coach is JP de Villiers, and Matt here works with JP and is part of JP's team. So tell us what your priorities are these days, Matt, working with JP.
Yeah, absolutely. So probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I read about JP in one of the books, Daniel Priestley's books, Keepers of Influence. Oh, wow, who is this guy? You know, he sounds supernatural almost. I don't know if you remember the story about the 500 pounds to 5K. I was like, holy crap. I thought I need to be that guy. It's crazy. He probably hasn't heard me say this many times, but I thought I need that in my life. So I started implementing those things about a year ago. Thought one day I'll find him on LinkedIn, found him, connected. I said, I'm running a podcast for leaders. I want to share inspiration that otherwise people wouldn't have access to. And he agreed to speak. And we got on a phone call. He was in the gym on the treadmill. And we were talking about all the things we had in common. Martial arts is something I did as a teenager. More karate. I wasn't really sort of Muay Thai or fighting. I did it for 8 years. My dad was a black belt in Shotokan karate, and he took me as well. So I learned a lot of discipline through that. Martial arts, sport, professional sport, DJing.
Yeah, you have a lot in common. Yeah.
Yeah, and then kind of sales, and then coaching. I thought, wow, this is just great. We've got so much in common. We started speaking. He invited me to join the group as well and speak and talk about the book and so on. And we just kept in touch. And one day recently, Mark Bryant, master coach in the business, went out to Dubai to spend a few days with JP and the gang. And he said, do you know who's really interested in developing his coaching is Matt Grady. He said, I wish you would have told me a year ago. Anyway, we had a call. We started talking about my future, my goals. I don't know what it is about turning 40, but I've had a lot of epiphanies over the last year. And I thought, you know what am I doing? All of the things seem to line up to me, surrounding myself with you and JP and Mark and others to bring it to life. Or on a full-time basis, I'll be coaching director within the business. So I'm spending a large amount of time on both internal and external clients, so managing and supporting our members of the mastermind community, but also looking at ways of how we can grow the community and export JP to more events, speaking, and help him elevate his game by taking the admin away from supporting the business, but at the same time also developing my own style of coaching through the lessons I've learned through sport and business, so I can help others be their highest performing self.
Brilliant. What I was going to say I'll do is I'll put a link in the show notes to the program and to your LinkedIn and stuff like that. So if people want to connect with you or whatever, that they can do that. Is there any final message that you'd like to share, or is there any question that I didn't ask you?
I'm going to plug our live events. That's this weekend. It may come after the podcast has launched, but we're running a live event this weekend called Becoming Non-Negotiable, and it's about how you can learn the disciplines, the deeper disciplines of wealth, health, and happiness, and how you can implement non-negotiables into your life. And I think probably one thing I'd leave it on would be the one thing that I've found actually over the last couple of years since meeting JP and surrounding myself with a very different group of people is decisions are very easy when the value is clear. Clarity on goals and where you want to go is underrated. I found that something that I spend most time on nowadays, as well as doing the doing, is getting really clear on what I'm doing, because once you're absolutely crystal clear on what you want to do, everything just seems to take care of itself.
It's one of my top values is clarity, focus, and discipline are the three that are kind of front of mind, you know.
And there's so much comes off the back of that. And I'll ask you a question about that as well, Gavin. The one thing we spoke about previously as well, just the recording, was the 90-10 principle. I'm just making the number up. And it's my theory is, and what I've found is that in sport, we spend about 90% training and practicing and preparing for the main event, just like you with your cycling and triathlons and running. You would spend 90% of your schedule, almost 3 months, let's say, leading up to one event that might take 4 hours, for example.
Yeah.
And that gets missed in a lot of businesses. And I think a lot of people, where they're going wrong is they're spending 90% trying to figure out how to do the doing, and then about 10% faffing around doing the doing, not to its highest level. If they flip the switch a little bit and said, I'm going to focus 90% of my attention on becoming an expert in what I do, when I get on the phone to the prospect, or when I pitch a deal, or when I go to buy a property or negotiate with a bank, I'm turning up the Tiger Woods of my business, or whoever, you know, your role model might have been.
Yeah, Tiger mightn't be the best one.
No, he's not really the best one, is he? But yeah, it's interesting how I just see a lot of people not showing up as a pro. You know, they're making money out of something, but they're really half
asking. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matt, final question I wanted to ask. Before I ask the final question, how can people find you? Is the best way LinkedIn, or what's the?
I think LinkedIn's where I've been building my deepest following over the last few years, or last 11 years. That's where I share most of my thought leadership content and guidance on how to work with me. I think I'm learning a lot through JP about being more omnipresent and available across all channels to meet people where they are. Not a lot of people hang out on LinkedIn. Our audience, I would say, has a good connection with LinkedIn. But yeah, if you find me on LinkedIn, you'll find me everywhere, because I've done one of those link trees too.
Oh yeah, the link tree, it's cool. Matt, my final question is so you're 40 now.
Yes.
Knowing today what you know, if you had the opportunity to speak to your 18 to 20-year-old self, what advice would you be giving that young Matt that you wish you had known now that you know what you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the early days, the internet and websites were just starting to sort of become prolific. And I set up a website for my sponsors. I wish I would have documented my journey and life better. so that I could share it with others, but also so that I could bring more awareness to what I'm doing. And I found that people are interested in people doing interesting things. And I gave up too early on getting more sponsorship and support. I didn't know how to ask. So I think probably off the back of that, where this is going, maybe I'm just figuring this out as we go along, is become better at asking for what I want, and almost been a better salesperson as a young guy. If I would have marketed myself differently, been willing to ask more people for help, I could have maybe sustained my career in golf a lot longer.
It's interesting. Yeah. It's funny you say that, because I can recall when I was a teenager, late teens, I started a small little business valeting cars. And it was a business that was just kind of like in the summer months, I would bring all this kind of bucket and sponge, and I brought it to a car park that was a busy car park. And I got them to let me take a space and to clean cars there. And I put ads on all the windows of the cars that came in and things like that. And when I went back to school, I just said, okay, that's the end of that. And I basically stopped the business. But the following, a few years later, I met the guy that I used to kind of speak to every day that was working there. And he said, after you left, hundreds of people were coming at saying, where's the young guy that cleans the cars? And I retrospectively, I look and I kind of go, that was me focusing on only what I wanted instead of thinking, what's the opportunity here? And I could have easily hired somebody to come in and keep the business going and agreed to split the revenue in some way or whatever. And that would have been a business that I could have come back to at the next summer instead of it just dropping off, like that. So
absolutely,
we all learn with experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you sort of see these points and think, bloody hell, if I would have just, I made the mistake as well of thinking that I could do everything on my own without the support of others. Being that driven guy, that I'll just do it and I'll make it work. And if I can't make it work, I'll make something else work instead of just sticking at it. But yeah, I'm not afraid of asking for any help now, which is the lesson learned. Yeah.
Well, Matt, it's been a real pleasure having you on the podcast. Thanks so much for your time.
Absolute pleasure.
And good luck with all your endeavors, and hope to catch you very soon again.
Thank you, Gavin. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Facade. If you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, please connect with me via the Facebook group that is called Behind the Facade Community. Alternatively, you will find me on social media. My handle is Gavin J. Gallagher. You can stay up to date with all of my content and the various projects I'm working on over on my website, gavinjgallagher.com. And while you're there, please do add your name to the Join My Tribe thing over on the right-hand side. This will ensure you're kept up to date via my weekly newsletter. All of these links are in the show notes below. That's all for now. I will see you guys in the next episode.